joining us today. Ramya is the Associate Director of Executive Education Program in Change and Consultation and Adjunct Professor in the Social Organizational Psychology Program at Teachers College, Columbia University. Ramya brings deep expertise in organizational change and leadership, and today she will share with us her insight on a human-centered approach to technology, AI-driven change, insight from a mixed methods study. Ramya, thank you for being with us. I'll stop sharing my screen now, and please feel free to start sharing your screen whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Masa. Glad to be here. Hi, everyone. Welcome and thanks for taking the time today to explore this very important topic of the role of human emotions and group dynamics and impacting organizational change readiness with me. I'm Ramya Kumar. I'm a scholar practitioner. I'm an organizational development consultant and executive coach. I currently work and teach at Columbia. I also have a private practice where I help individuals, groups, and organizations navigate change. Over the last several years, I've been very curious about and working on this topic of what really helps build change readiness and looking at how might understanding where our people are, how might understanding our members, employees' emotional response to change and what happens within groups really shape change readiness in organizations. My thesis is a result of that inquiry, and I'm very happy to share what we found from this study today. I'm going to start sharing my screen, and I'm hoping, fingers crossed, it works. Can everyone see it? Could you give me a thumbs up if you could see it? All right, perfect. Thank you very much. Marissa, I'm not able to scroll through the slide deck. Let me see if I can. Can you see it now? Is it?
Yes, yeah, it's right. Now we see the agenda one. Okay, perfect.
All right. So the agenda for today's session is I would start with providing you with a brief overview of this entire research and why is understanding, affect or emotions and team dynamics so important in building change readiness, and why now. I'll also talk briefly about our method and key research findings, and I'm glad to share with you some very practical takeaways from the research that you can take back to your organizational context with your change initiatives. The purpose of my research is twofold. One is to really use an evidence-based, data-driven approach to examine the role of affect and group dynamics, especially implicit group dynamics, the dynamics that are harder to decipher, harder to observe and interpret within teams and organizations. And my second purpose is also to explore using a mixed methods approach to gain a more nuanced understanding of this very complex topic. To do that, I used a diagnostic frame of system psychodynamics. I'll talk briefly to this. So there are two broad aspects of group life. One pertains to the content piece of group processes. I'm referring to the what in group processes. For instance, pertaining to change, what are my roles and responsibilities with regards to change? What is my authority, positional authority? What communication happens within teams? What decisions are being made? That's the content aspect of group life. The process aspect of it is about the why things happen the way they do. Why do things show up the way they do? So this, for example, if what decisions are being made is the content aspect of group life, why and how are these decisions being made is the process aspect of group life. So in that sense, the overt dynamics or the content piece of group processes are rather invisible. They are explicit, they're easy to observe and interpret. They're more sociological or structural in nature, pertains to role, task, for example, formal authority in organizations. The process piece or the covert dynamics are a little more difficult to observe. They are what happens beneath the surface, but are nevertheless so very important aspects to consider while you're building change readiness in organizations. These are more psychological in nature. As much as change can be exciting to a few, change can also be very stressful and anxiety-provoking. So what are your members' emotional responses to change? How might that show up in the interaction with one another, interaction with the system? How might that show up in a way that may not be readily observable? That's the psychological aspect to change. So for my research purposes, applying this system psychodynamics frame really helps get a very comprehensive understanding of both the structural or the systems aspects and the psychological or, beneath the surface processes that impact change. Why is this important and why now? I mean, we all know the imperative for change now, especially with so much disruptions happening in the external environment. It was either the pandemic or now the huge explosion of AI and technology-driven changes. We have no dearth of change frameworks, right? We have a lot of frameworks available, right from Lewin's framework early on in the 1900s to the more recent models like the ADKAR framework from ProSci. But in spite of all of these, many change initiatives still don't see success. A lot of these change initiatives fail. A very important predictor of change success is change readiness. To what extent are we ready to implement this change? And research really does not provide us with a lot of consensus or a very rigorous framework on how to assess change readiness. Another important aspect is looking at implicit dynamics. Of course, there are a lot of books written about overt and covert dynamics and how that impacts change readiness, but we still do not have data-based evidence, or empirical research on how exactly do group processes affect change. The last aspect, last but not least, is using mixed methods. We researchers love qualitative methods, interviews, focus groups, right? Why not? I mean, they provide a very nuanced understanding of the topic. It provides richer narrative stories that we can take back to understand what's actually happening in the scope of change. But having said that, qualitative methods have their own shortcomings. It's not easy. You might not be able to interview all members in your organization to get a bigger picture. It might not be generalizable. It's very time consuming. So more often than not, change practitioners resort to quantitative methods. Right? Quick and dirty. Use surveys, get some data, insights. This can be generalizable. You can tap into a lot of population, a lot of members in your organization. The flip side of quantitative research is that you don't get these nuanced understanding of what's going on in your organization as much as you would get from interviews or focus groups. So one main focus of my research is to be able to bring together both of these powerful research methods and see how might the mixed methods approach really help us get us data that's evidence-based, data that can be generalizable to a larger population, but also gives us a very complex understanding of what's going on in organizations. So a huge part of this research was to do an extensive change literature review of all the change frameworks we have, all the information that we have with regards to change readiness. And my literature review highlighted 5 aspects of change readiness, or 5 measures that go into measuring change readiness. They are here. The first one is, of course, a need for change, right? The extent to which employees believe there's a need for change. Why do we need to change? Why now? And the more important question, what's in it for me? I understand your organization. As an organization, we need to change. I understand your business case for ROI, but what's in it for me? More often than not, it comes down to that. So need for change measures that. Leadership alignment, the extent to which employees believe that the leaders are committed to change, they're actively sponsoring change, and the leadership is aligned on where we would like to go with this change. The third measure is vision for change. Do we all have clarity on what change means? What's our future vision? What's the big picture? Also, what's expected out of me? Change communication, the extent to which employees believe that change communication is timely, credible, transparent. Am I getting information from my leadership, from my management that helps me get a clarity on what's going on? Do I hear from it from informal sources? Am I, those water cooler conversations that we all have together, are these saying the same story? Am I hearing something from my management that's also something that comes from my informal sources? Do they talk together to each other or not? Change communication. And the last measure, mobilizing energy for change. And here's where us organizational psychologists love talking about this concept of self-efficacy. the extent to which your employee believes that they have the skills and ability to implement change. But then that's only part of the story. I might believe that I have everything that's required from me to implement this change, but do I feel motivated to do that? Right? So self-efficacy, how motivated am I to put in those efforts? And if I do put in those efforts, can I trust my leaders to have my back in this initiative? If I hit an obstacle, can I trust my managers, my team leads to help me through that? So what I did with this research is put this all together from these 5 organizational change readiness measures, derive some indicators, tie it back to 2 organizational models. One, the Berkeley-Twin model, that really helps me look at the systems part of change. What's change strategy? What are the processes we have in place? What authority structures we have in place? And with X-ray vision tool that talks a lot about beneath the surface. So for example, if Berkeley-Twin model tells me that these are the people who are leading change, X-ray vision tool really helps me understand, okay, that's positional authority, but is the leader really authorized by the members to take up the charge? And that's very important to know as well. So together, this forms a conceptual framework based on which I developed 2 research instruments, a survey instrument, and an interview questionnaire. But that's not all, because there's emotions in here, right? We're still talking about systems and psychodynamics. So another important aspect and what we consider a unique contribution of this research to change readiness is assessing affect, assessing emotional responses to change. And we did it through 3 ways. One is to collect data through visual research methods using images. And you'll see through my presentation when I present findings, how we were able to use these images to collect insightful data. The second way is to use affect scales, validated affect scales. We measured 7 positive affect and 7 negative affect scales to come up with an overall idea of where the employees are with respect to change. And the last aspect of measuring affect is through metaphors. Now, metaphors are very powerful way of tapping into what's often not said, tapping into members' associations with change. I'm going to take a brief pause here, stop sharing, but I want you to, at this point in time, think about any change initiative that you have been or currently a part of in your organization. If you're not currently working, maybe in any other work or social setting, think about a large-scale change initiative. What comes to your mind when you think about it? Are there any metaphors that come to mind? Are there any images that come to mind? Any adjectives that come to mind? Feel free to drop them on chat. It doesn't have to be elaborate. It can just be something that 1 or 2 words that comes to your mind when you think about this change initiative. Masa, I hope I'll be able to see chat. If not, please help me with that. Oh, I can see it. All right. Perfect. I'll give you a moment to reflect. And whenever you're ready, Chicken Little, of course, the sky is falling, right? Absolutely, Bridget. Feedback, beliefs change. Yes, messy chaos. Absolutely, change is messy. Flying and building a plane at the same time. Yes, yes. The aspect of going somewhere and working your way towards that in these environments. Absolutely. Confusing. We don't know how. Traumatic. Yes. Hurry to slow down. That deeply resonates with me. Cultural change needed. Absolutely. Changes often require change of mindsets as well, right? Fear. Yes. Change generates a lot of anxiety and fear as well. Us versus them, dynamics, group dynamics, absolutely. I don't know what I want, but let's do it anyway. Absolutely, Dennis. So how might that impact how you approach change and how much efforts you put in change? Resistance, absolutely. All of these great metaphors, great adjectives of how you describe change. Now think about this as data. How powerful will it be as organizational change practitioners for you to somehow collect this as a form of data to understand how your employees are sitting with change and processing change? And what actionable insights might you be able to collect out of this data and use it towards really helping building change readiness? So this was a huge aspect of our research. We're just not talking about emotions and saying, okay, what are you feeling? But identifying evidence-based ways to collect it, measure it, and use those as actionable insights to drive change efforts. I'm going to try sharing my screen one more time. All right, there we go. Let me talk quickly to the methods piece. I'm not going to belabor this a lot, but our research design that we use was convergent mixed methods multiple case design. It's a mouthful. I'll break it down for you. I have a separate, the next slide we'll talk more about it. But basically what it means is that we tried collecting data from more than one organization and tried to collect both our survey and interview data approximately around the same time for quick and efficiency of data collection. We used two organizations in this study. Both organizations were undergoing plan change. Let's call them Group A and Group B. Group A were members of a digital practice department in IT consulting sector, and they were looking at introducing a whole new suite of digital practice and AI-based offerings, partly because that's where a lot of these organizations are headed, and partly because they had a lot of requests and kind of a need from the clients to provide them with more digital transformation services. Group B is from the digital innovation department of an institution of higher ed. So it's a very different industry, but they were also looking at introducing a whole new set of services, AI-based offerings. But this was in response to, this was more towards, integrating AI in their curriculum to help their faculty members navigate AI and help students with how do you go about using AI. Two different kind of change contexts here, but both organizations were at the very initial stages of implementing these changes. How else could we compare, right? If one organization has already completed the change and another one is just starting, as a researcher, how else would I then compare the results? So we had to make sure that both organizations were in similar stages of implementing these changes. Both of these members had received at least one formal communication on change, and there had been at least one department-wide meeting to discuss these changes. All right, I love flowcharts. I'm very proud of this flowchart, but it just kind of gives a quick representation of, the research methods here. So step one is, of course, data collection. We collected both quantitative and qualitative data at the same time. Quantitative was a survey that I hosted on Qualtrics, and qualitative was about one-on-one interviews that we conducted on Zoom. So very practical, very convenient online. The second step was data analysis. So each set of data, the data that we received from survey and the data that we received from interviews, were analyzed separately. And once that's done, step three is then to merge the two set of results. So comparing the statistically significant quantitative results from survey and key interview themes that came out, and using a joint display table to do that. And what's the purpose? When we interpret the merged results, we are looking for convergence, divergence, and or complementarity. So convergence is when both sets of data speak to one another. When my interview results seem to align with my survey results, there seems to be some convergence. Both data sets are speaking to each other. That's where I'm looking for convergence. Divergence is when they don't speak to each other. Maybe my survey result tells a story and my interview themes tell a different story. And what might that mean with regards to this topic? And finally, I'm looking for complementarity. So let's say my data converges. My survey results are very aligned with my interview results. Does it stop there, or together do these merged data help me get a better understanding, a more nuanced and detailed understanding of what's going on in these organizations? So convergence, divergence, and complementarity. And because this is a multiple case design, I had two organizations to compare. So I can do analysis within groups, within organizations, but also between groups to see if there are any results that can be generalizable to all contexts. So let's move into findings. This is the most interesting part for me. I'll be presenting this starting with quantitative findings, and then we'll move on to qualitative. And as we talk through this, I'll try to kind of also try and weave in some mixed results that we got from both these data sets. Starting with Group A. So if you could see in the visual there, the chart, you could see that Group A participants were very energized with the study. There was a huge positive outlook towards the study. They were very enthusiastic, very determined, very hopeful, felt very safe and energized. So here the members showed a lot more positive effect and very less negative effect with regards to change. Positive affect here was associated with higher levels of all 5 change readiness measures, meaning the more you have employees showed a higher positive emotionality towards change, it correlated or corresponded with higher levels in all 5 change readiness measures that we saw earlier. Need to change, leadership alignment, vision for change, change communication, and mobilizing energy for change. With this group, we did not find any significant within group differences though. One other thing that I did was to also understand, all right, that's the overall picture, but within this group, were there any questions that kind of brought about mixed responses? Was there a lot of variation in responses from participants? And I found out that participants' response really varied a lot on the aspect of feeling inspired and burnout. Probably indicates ambivalence towards change. I feel inspired. Some of us also feel burned out. Really doesn't give a great, I mean, that's all there is to it. You can't interpret more out of it until you look at it alongside with interview results, and I'll come to that in a bit. By itself, the data doesn't mean much. Looking at Group B, you could see that it's mixed, right? If you could look at the visuals there, they were neither too positive about change nor too negative. Here again, high positive affect was associated with at least 3 change readiness measures. But what we found out with this group was there were very significant within group differences. So members' affect for change differed based on the years of experience within the organization. So you can see here that members who were with the organization for less than 1 year seemed more happier about change than those who are with the organizations for more than 5 years. That's a significant change. You could also see some significant difference based on their management levels. So members who were in the organization at the individual contributor level felt very energized towards change. They wanted to put in their efforts and time towards change than those who are at leadership or managerial level. So these are 2 significant differences that you could find even within this group that you cannot infer just by looking at the affect scale, right? It just shows a mixed picture. But when you get into within group differences, you're able to see how nuanced each of these subgroups are. Similar with Group A, I tried to look at variation in participant responses. So here, members varied based on how hopeful they felt and how skeptical they felt towards change. By itself, again, doesn't mean much, but makes a lot of sense when you look at it with interview results. All right, so between both the groups A and B, 2 different organizations, I did an analysis of variance to see if there are any significant difference between these 2 groups. Both groups differed both based on affect, both positive and negative effect, and that's huge. And if you could look at the word cloud here, very simple representation of their landscape, emotional landscape, you could see these words tell a very compelling story. If you look at Group A to your left, the most often described words used to describe change: innovation, exciting, opportunities, positive, growth, hopeful, but also something about time-consuming processes, success. For Group B, they were also very excited, but also very cautious, a sense of no direction, skeptical, and you could see these metaphors starting to come there. Hurricane, slippery slope. Moving on to qualitative findings. Now, we asked these participants at the beginning of the survey to look at 25 images and pick one image that most resonates with them when they associate it to the change initiative in their organization. And towards the end of the survey, we provided them with the same set of 25 images and asked them then to visualize what the organization might look like after implementing these changes and pick an image from the same set of images that they can closely associate with that change being implemented. If you could see here for Group A, to your left, you would see the images participants chose when the changes what they felt about the changes currently underway. A great picture, right? You see sunrise, you see keys, systems, tools, sunlight entering through a tunnel, space exploration. I provided some representative quotes here for you to get a better idea. You could see there a sense of optimism and readiness, sunlight symbolizing new changes, no boundaries in what we can achieve, strong, and also word of caution that if you do not have strong processes in place, we are looking at these changes, it might only create complications and chaos. So that's what they felt about the change as of now. And to your right, how they envision change after implementing these changes. Well, very many images do come back again. You could see sunrise, you could see light at the end of the tunnel, space exploration, but you could also see a clock. And their interpretation of that is that time is of essence in implementing these changes. Many of them felt that implementing these changes, bringing in those AI-related initiatives, could really be what their clients asked from them. They saw that as an opportunity for increasing revenue within the organization. They also saw a lot of hope in learning new skills and being able to use those new current relevant AI-related skills to advance their career. So you could see, and they wanted to do everything and do everything now because time is of essence. That's Group A. While we were interviewing Group A, we were also able to identify some very important subgroup dynamics that could affect change readiness. One of you mentioned this in the chat, us versus them, right? And here in this organization, it came across in terms of old versus new employees. So a lot of employees were hired to implement this change. So the newcomers were hired with relevant skills, transferable skills, and ready to work on the change that's required of them to implement the changes. The organization also had employees who were in the organization for a long period of time. They described these two sets as old versus new. This is their language. And many new employees felt that the older employees in the organization were less skilled and very resistant to change. So a very strong us versus them dynamic in terms of old versus new employees. If you look at the quote to the top of the page, that's a representative quote and kind of represents a lot of emotions that the newer hires were thinking about the older hires. Some old employees aren't allowing us to make these changes. They don't listen to us. They don't like the changes we propose. They get offended when we talk about bringing in new customers. And this might resonate with many of you in your organizations. When you're bringing in new employees with more relevant skills for whatever change that you're hiring them for, you might also be left with a lot of employees in organizations who might not have yet acquired those skills. So to be more mindful of that dynamic that ensues between your current employees and those who are bringing in new to implement the changes. Another us versus them dynamic that came with this group was between employees who were hired from a larger organization that seemed to be very adept in managing change. So more than 35% of participants identified as coming from an organization in the same industry that boasted of an extensive experience in change management. And they were very frustrated with this new current organization because they felt that this organization is yet to develop that change management acumen. If you look at the quote below the slide, we're pretty much used to these types of changes, but with a lack of proper change management here, we are becoming complacent. It's like I used to roam outside freely, and suddenly we are brought back into the zoo. And this kind of really very representative of many of these participants, the emotions they expressed. They felt very constrained. They felt like, well, I'm happy to be here, but we have to bring our processes up to speed or else it's just going to be chaotic. Some additional themes that came during these interviews that I put in here: need to upskill, need to hire more talent with the right skill, feeling overwhelmed and burned out with increasing workload. A lot of them felt that I'm happy to do all these. I know time is of essence. I know this change is good for me, but it's burning me out because some of our employees are yet to gain those skills, and I feel very pressurized and put into a place where I have to carry a lot of the weight of this change implementation. So here, if you could connect it with the quantitative slide of the variation in responses, right? Being very energized and feeling of overwhelmed, burned out, this is where it comes from. So when you connect these two, you're able to see how they might be very hopeful and what is draining their energy, what might be putting a stopper on their change efforts. All right, that's Group A. Group B, similar questions, but you see a different story here. If you look at the participants' felt emotions about change that's currently underway, I see that we see the systems piece here too, but also you could see that slippery slope. You could see the hurricane. You could see a child standing on a bike looking into what one of them described as a black hole. And some of you mentioned that. I know I'm going, but where am I going and how do I get there? And also the sunrise. So a lot of focus on tools, their function, and less on ethical implications. Or wider impacts. They see it as a well-worn path as well as a slippery slope, elements of play and exploration, but also precarity. So you could see where some of those mixed responses come from and their kind of skepticism about the change. To your right, if you could look at the images they associated with for how they envision the organization after implementing the changes, the clock comes here again, right? You still see the slippery slope, the hurricane, all of that, but the clock comes here again, but it's a very different interpretation of this image as compared to Group A. With Group A, they associated this with clock as, we have an urgency to change. But with this group, if you could see the second quote beneath it, time is passing, but not a lot has changed. A sense of being stuck, a sense of being, you can take 1 year or 2 years in this change, but we don't know where we are going. I feel like we are going to be in the same place or worse when all of this is implemented. So I feel like 1 year in AI is turned into a hurricane, pretty directionless, gaining momentum, a sense of loss of control, changes happening to me, not with me, and I don't know where this is going. I don't feel a sense of control with it. So you could see how the same images, but how might they be associated within different ways? And I think that's one of the beauty of using visual imagery. It's not just the images themselves, but how your members associate with it that helps them tap into their unconscious, that helps them come up with narratives or share things that they might not have earlier felt the need to put into words or into narrations. Similar to Group A, Group B showed some prevalence of subgroup dynamics as well. And in here, it was a bit different. There was a clear us versus them dynamic. And here it pertained to full-time and part-time employees. Group B, again, is higher ed. And in this context, both the full-time and part-time employees were asked to pull the same load in terms of change management. There was no real differentiation in terms of the time and efforts they put in, but the full-time employees got a lot of change-related communication. They had access to training opportunities. They had meetings with their managers at least once a month to review all of this. So they had a level of clarity and access to resources that the part-time employees did not have. And that's the reason for this specific subgroup dynamic. And the part-time employees, because they were part-time and they did not want to do something that shakes the boat, many of them, all three in this interview group, for instance, never shared their concerns because of the fear of job displacement. They never said anything about it, never shared this with their supervisors, but we're still feeling very, not being provided the same access to resources and information as that was provided to their full-time employees, but still being asked to do the same, put in the same level of efforts as their full-time peers. Another subgroup dynamic here was based on authority. Although 88% of the participants felt that they could voice out any concerns, more than half of them were quite certain that, yes, I can voice out my concerns, but these concerns would never be addressed. And if you could look at the two quotes, the first quote is from an individual contributor. We have opportunities to raise a concern, but it will never be addressed. Many issues I've been raising over the years have never been addressed. So I don't see the need to raise my concern anymore. I feel like it doesn't go anywhere. I've kind of become more reserved. So what might that do to change efforts and bringing their voice in the process? And the quote below is from a leader, a manager level person in the managerial level. I feel like over the last several years, I've seen quite a few initiatives trying to fix issues that didn't go anywhere. So in the end, I feel like it's a big waste of time and effort. I'm not going to engage in this initiative anymore. So you could see different, and if you connect this back to the quantitative data as to why the people who are in the organization for less number of years were very energized and hopeful than those who are in the organization for more than 5 years, you could see that it has something to do, a lot to do with change history. A lot of them said this change is like old wine in a new bottle. We're never getting anything done. So that's the big contributor to the within group difference you saw. And also about, I trust my manager to hear me out, but I don't know that's going to result in anything because these queries or concerns are never addressed. So why bother? And you could see how that might impact change efforts and motivation. Though these members might have skills and capabilities, they might not be very motivated to change, and that impacts your change readiness as well. Some additional themes that came out in here, again, distrust in the organization based on change history, red tape, bureaucracy, that the leadership team talks a lot about change, but never addresses the ethical and legal ramifications of using AI. So a lot of distrust there and a lot of context and organizational culture at play here. So between groups A and B, though they were both in similar change stages, though they were both initiating AI-related change efforts, you could see differences, at least in these 3 change readiness measures. In the first group, members feeling change was a need of the hour, and the second group, although most of them felt that this change is required, they didn't perceive any urgency for change. Why bother? Why put in efforts? Differences in terms of leadership alignment, with the first group saying, oh, our leaders are really committed to this, and the second group not feeling that as much. And vision for change, the first group, a lot of them had a clear understanding of leadership's vision. In the second group, most of them didn't even know what was happening with it. In fact, one of the interview participants from group B, when they came to the interview, the first thing they asked me is that, Ramya, I got your invitation to interview, and I came to talk to you mainly because I don't know what's going on. You speak about a change initiative. I don't know what you're talking about. Is there something going on in the organization? I have no clue. Can you please tell me what's going on? Right. So you could see here that you did see a lot of convergence in both the quantitative and qualitative data, but together, how they really provide a very powerful story, goes beyond just one set of data. You were able to see a lot of aspects about change context, about change history, about how your years of experience within an organization might have a different play, implicit dynamics. So this result actually together, these 2 sets of data in this study really came together to provide a story, more actionable insights than one set of data alone, especially in terms of affect and change efforts. All right, so in sum, because we started with content and process for group life, I wanted to kind of wrap this up talking about content and process. So overall, what we hope this research achieved is in terms of content, absolutely emphasizing the need to examine affect and group dynamics, not the ones we can readily observe, but also really dig deep into what could be some beneath the surface dynamics that impacts change readiness. And we hope we have presented a very evidence-based framework for looking at these aspects for change. In terms of process, using visual research methods for us here really helped bring to surface a lot of things that maybe left unsaid in surveys or interviews, and really showing the power of using a mixed methods approach. Not just that, together, you can also see from these findings how important it is to not just broad brush everything as my members are generally happy or generally unhappy, but really look for any within group differences that could really impact change readiness, and also other contextual factors. In this study, it was change history, its organizational culture, is a response to the external environment. Group A needed to adapt to the environment to survive. Group B felt no urgency. Yeah, we might not bring in AI-related curriculum, but that's not an urgent need for us to change. So external environment and need for change plays a huge role here. I spoke about implications, so I'll just take one last minute to talk about this, and I'd love to open it up for any questions you may have. If you're taking anything from this study, these are the 3 things I want you to think about. The need to look at where your members are in change. What are their felt emotions to these changes, and if there are any implicit team dynamics. The best part is that you've seen that affect plays a huge role in all measures of change readiness. So ideally, you would want to take a look at it at the beginning of the change process, but really you can very well be implementing a change, and in a different set of stage of change process, this would still apply. You can look at affect and team dynamics, even when you've gone past the vision, communication, while you're mobilizing energy for change. It's still worth looking at where your employees are in terms of the emotions and any implicit team dynamics, especially in context that there's a large context that really increase anxiety. If you're M&As, for example, mergers and acquisitions, things like that, AI integration. Really think about using a mixed methods approach. It doesn't have to be very time consuming. My entire thesis, I designed the survey, the interview, got an IRB approval. All of this, including data analysis, took me 3 months. You might have more resources in your organization. So a conversion method really helps with looking at survey data, interview data, collecting them at the same time. And as change practitioners, it's pragmatic and time efficient, and you can customize it to your needs. I mean, in today's day, age and time, you might even use AI for a high-level data analysis. That could help you with some interpretation as well. Next, definitely consider contextual factors, not just within the organization, also in the external environment, like we saw in the study, and definitely look at within group differences that might help build or hinder change readiness. All right, thank you. I'd love to take any questions you have. My contacts here. I also have a QR code like that. You can quickly scan your screen. Let me know if you have any questions or feedback, and if you'd like to stay connected with this study and learn more about where we are going with this. Thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure sharing my research insights. I can take any questions you may have. And
thank you so much, Maria, and we all got so much. And thank you, everyone, for interacting. I can see Matt has a raised hand. So, Matt, do you mind unmuting yourself?
Yep. No problem. I just wanted to confirm, if you didn't explain it already, the way you did the image study, the image metaphor study. Did you give a limited set of images, like 6 or 9 to each? Or did you give them like more and say, pick the ones that most reflect your experience?
I gave them a set of 25 images and then asked them to pick one in the beginning of the survey and one towards the end. Same set of 25 images.
Thank you.
Of course. Thank you.
Patricia, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm curious the amount of time between the survey and the interview. Did you do them like back to back to keep that same frame of mind that they were in the survey versus the interview, or a day apart? Kind of explain how you determined the time spacing with those two.
Absolutely. That's a great question. And because it's conversion, these were collected around the same time frame. So it is possible that some members did the survey and then attended the interviews, and some did their interviews first but completed the surveys later. So it was around the same time frame. The main idea was to be able to collect it in a time that's more also very representative of how we might collect data in today's organizations. Otherwise, this study would have taken a long time for me to complete the survey and then do the interview. So around the same time frame, Patricia.
Do you have any recommendations on the amount of time? Like, don't go over waiting a week, or don't go over waiting 2 weeks. Do you have any like recommendations related to that piece?
Absolutely. I mean, I would say it depends. If you ask any organizational psychologist, that's a favorite phrase. It depends, but it depends on your organization's context, right? If you're an organization that sees a lot of responses to survey, perhaps when you roll out surveys, etc., you might just need probably 2 weeks and a reminder, 3-week tops. But if you're an organization where members are more reticent to provide data, or it takes time, then that might need a little bit more of a push from your end to get data. But I would say 1 week is too lax, and probably 4 or 5 weeks is too long. So anywhere between that time frame. So a lot of participation happens towards the beginning, and then it also depends on how you remind or gently nudge them. It depends on a lot of other factors too. Do your employees even feel safe to provide data, right? So being able to keep it anonymous or confidential to that extent builds more credibility in the process, and maybe you'll see more responses based on that. Our surveys were totally anonymous and confidential. So we promised them that no personal information, identifiable information would be shared with anybody, even during reporting. That seemed to help.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Lubna, please go ahead.
Thank you, Ramya. I'm intrigued by the use of visual imagery too. And kind of as a follow-up to Matt's question, how did you choose your 25 images? Like, how do you ensure there's no bias when you are choosing the images? Or like, are you trying to do a balance of positive versus negative images? I don't know.
Great question. I got this from Visual Explorer cards, and those are some research methods that we do use in organizational consulting as well. If you could look at Visual Explorer cards, you should be able to find that on net, or I'm happy to send it to you if I have your contacts. But yeah, it's not really just the images. You know, that's the best part about visual research, because whatever images you provide, and you do try to provide a balance, it's really what the members associate with the image and why. So it's not just the image they choose, it's a narrative they provide. So we made it a mandatory field that they choose an image and tell us why they chose that image. Like if you could see in the study, you could see the same set participants from group A and group B both chose the clock. The clock didn't matter. What mattered is what they associated that with. One was how time is of essence, and the other is giving a feeling of stuckness. So it's not just about the images. And we also try to triangulate it, right? The images were not the only thing we used to measure affect. There's images, there's an affect scale. We use a lot of use of metaphors while doing interviews. So just very much like we spoke about metaphors in the initial part of this session. So using all three provides you a very powerful combination of, data that you can collect to get more detailed insights. I hope that answers your question, Lubna.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sandine, please go ahead.
Yeah, just a couple of simple questions. And, first, thanks. This actually makes me feel hopeful that we can address things. Did you, I might have missed it, did you publish a link to the paper? If not, could you throw it in the chat? And I think that's all. I'll stop there. But it'd be nice to, if you'd written a paper about this, it'd be nice to look into that. And if this might sound strange, but if you have any favorite podcasters or videos or books or things out there to follow up and kind of, I've been trying to do change, but not at this level. It'd be nice to just look at people who do what you're doing here and kind of soak it into my head.
Absolutely. At this point in time, it remains a thesis. So it's at the Columbia repositories, but also if you are a member of Association of Change Management Practitioners, ACMP, it resides there too, where I recently presented on their Global Connect. So you should be able to see an entire version of that paper residing there. I am working on an abbreviated version, Sandin. Hopefully soon you will see a related publication out there. But yeah, ESCP, I'm sure, offers a wealth of resources to change management journals. Journal of Change Management, Journal of Applied Behavior Sciences, JABS. They're also great places to look at some cutting edge research that's happening around change.
Okay, thank you kindly.
You're very welcome.
Thank you so much. Great. From all the round of like back-to-back questions, you can see how valuable your insight was, Ramya. We thank you so much. Please, everyone, give her a round of virtual applause. Thank you so much for taking your time to share your knowledge with us. I'm going to put a few information in the chat. So we're gathering input about shaping the future webinars. So please fill in the survey. Let us know if you want to present, what are the topics you want to hear. That would be very helpful. For the PMI PDUs, there is the second link. Please ensure to fill it in. That's required to get your PDUs. Stay in touch. I put the website, Blue Sky, LinkedIn group link in the chat. And I put all my speaking notes here because I wasn't sure if I'm going to make it or not. It's 11, but thank you everyone for joining today. We'll see you next year. It's going to be in February. It's going to be another amazing presentation. Rachel Bones is going to join us. I'm just being mindful of the time. I put a brief bio about Rachel in the chat, and it's going to be a great session, a must-attend one. Until next year, stay safe. Happy New Year, everyone. And the feedback and interest survey form is closed. Thank you so much. I'm going to make sure that I open it. That's a mistake from my end. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Wish you a very happy new year and hope to see you all next year. Thank you, Ramya. Thanks, everyone, for joining.
Thanks.
Take care.
Such news,
Bye.
everyone.
Oh, thank you. Bye.